Hello and welcome to History at Long Road. I'm Clare Dunkerely, the course team leader for history, and myself and other members of the history team have just designed a small presentation to deal with many of the questions that you would have asked at open evening had we been meeting physically on the site. Now, if we were meeting on the site, straight away you'd see how spacious it is and the classrooms that you have your history lessons in, which again are nice and spacious rooms. So if you've opened this presentation, you're probably somebody really keen to study history further and go beyond GCSE. You probably really love a particular topic, or you've been inspired by your GCSE teacher, or you've been successful at GCSE. And we want that kind of person at A-level. We want somebody who's really interested, who's got the skills that they're developing, and we can take those further at A-level. But we also ask that you get a GCSE grade 5 or above in history and a GCSE grade 5 or above in English language, as well as the usual 7 GCSEs grade 4 to 9 that you need for A-level. And the reason for those qualifications is that we want you to succeed at A-level history. And on the course, there are no more short 4 or 6 mark questions that you might get at GCSE. They're all long mark questions, essay style questions. So ideally, if you're someone studying GCSE and enjoying the longer mark questions now, the 12 mark, the 16 mark questions, then you've probably got the skills to succeed at A-level and enjoy it as well. So this next slide makes it clear why we ask for those GCSE qualifications, because at the end of a 2-year course, you get some quite heavy exams, 2.5 hours long, and you can see how the course is divided into the breadth, depth and coursework components. You can also see on this the exam board that we follow, which is AQA, and all exam boards at A-level will have fairly similar length exams and divide the course up into 3 components. And the reason we chose AQA for our A-level at Long Road is that it allowed us to choose some really interesting topics and put together a course which we think you will find interesting, engaging, and a course that you can succeed on and get the best grades possible. This slide here shows the topics that we've chosen to study. So on the depth study, you can study either Germany or Russia and look at the rise of the Nazis in Germany, or Lenin and Stalin in Russia. And you combine that with a longer period of study, a 100-year period. And we look at 17th century England, the Stuarts and the crisis of monarchy. And that again, we're able to contrast with a very different topic and look at the USA, so going outside of England and Europe, and looking at the USA from 1860 to 1965 and the struggle for civil rights from slavery to civil rights. You can see there you've got some really fascinating options. And in this next section, we're just going to talk in a bit more detail about, well, what would each of these sections involve? And I'm going to talk to you first of all about the breadth study, the Stuarts. So this topic is one that's really, really fascinating. You've got the monarchs, James I, Charles I, clashing with Parliament trying to get a bit more assertive, a bit more powerful, and these clashes will lead eventually to a period of civil war. At the end of those civil wars, you'll have the execution of the monarch, England being the first country ever to have put a monarch on trial and execute them. And then we study the experiments in government that follow and how England tried to govern itself without a monarch. And of course, we look at Cromwell, and you might have studied him a little bit before. He's local to this area. Following that, we look at the restoration of the monarchy and the big questions of, well, why was the monarchy restored? Is it restored with the same powers? That any limitations applied to it? And running across this period, of course, is the element of religion. And we do look at that as well and how it caused conflict. So if you've studied Elizabeth as part of your GCSE, you'll be aware of the issues of Catholicism, Puritanism, and they again are active across this period. So a really fascinating topic to study, and I really can't recommend this period enough to you. So when we get to the summer term of year 1, we begin to study for the coursework, and we look at America from 1860 to 1965. You may well have some background knowledge of elements of that, you might not. We assume no knowledge. And the period begins with the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, the freed slave, putting pressure on him, and we get the end of slavery. And then you get this long period of struggle against the segregation laws that are established in the South, till eventually you end the period with 2 very strong civil rights acts of 1964 and 1965, which end segregation, guarantee voting rights, and they're passed by President Lyndon Johnson, and of course you've got Martin Luther King active in that time. So we think this is a fascinating topic to study, and it's a great one to do coursework on because there's lots of accessible material that you can use independently from the teacher, and it allows you to look at sort of the role of activists, the role of presidents, and produce some really good coursework.
Hi, I'm Miranda Perkins, another of the history teachers at Long Road. One of the courses that I teach on is the Germany course, and I want to talk to you a little bit about that now. Of course, you've all heard of Hitler and the atrocities of World War II, and a lot of people's interest in history is sparked by trying to explain how these things could have happened. After all, Germany was one of the most democratic countries in Europe at the time. How could this just have been swept aside? The Germany course tries to answer this question. As you can see from the slide, the course begins with a study of the Weimar Republic, and here we begin to unpack the causes of Hitler's success. The loss of World War I had, after all, cast a long shadow over Germany, and society was deeply divided. In the fullness of time, this provided an opportunity for Hitler, although of course most Germans never voted for him. When we move on to look at Germany under the Nazis, more questions emerge. How did the Nazis succeed in controlling the German people so absolutely? Did they even control them absolutely? Were the people complicit in the regime? Willing participants, maybe? This question becomes even more acute when we look at the events of World War II and the Holocaust. As many of you will know, 6 million Jews lost their lives in the Holocaust. Was this the result of a master plan hatched by Adolf Hitler alone? Or was there no overall plan, but a series of ever more abhorrent decisions made possible by war and by the rising tide of anti-Semitism, which engulfed not just Germany, but all of Europe? Our Germany course looks at all of these questions and more, and I've yet to meet a student who hasn't enjoyed discussing them.
Hello, my name is Laura. I'm one of the history teachers at Long Road, and I'm going to tell you about one of the options you can study as a depth study. The Russia Depth Study covers the period of Russian history from 1917 to 1953. In the first year, we study 1917 to 1929. We look at the Russian revolutions of 1917, when the Tsarist regime was overthrown and replaced by a provisional government, and then that provisional government was overthrown by a small communist party known as the Bolsheviks, led by a man called Vladimir Lenin. The Bolsheviks seized power at a time of great turmoil in Russia, and there were many opponents to their government. We study how the Bolsheviks managed to stay in power. We think about the civil war that broke out in Russia at this time, and the measures they used to suppress and remove their enemies. Then we study the period after Lenin's death in 1924. We think about the key contenders to succeed him, and study the devious tactics that one of them, Joseph Stalin, used to outwit the others and take power. In the second year of the course, we study the period from 1929 to Stalin's death in 1953. First, we consider the extensive economic and social reforms that Stalin introduced in an attempt to modernize Russia. Secondly, we study the Terror, a period of Russian history in which an increasingly paranoid Stalin tried to hunt down and remove anyone he perceived to be an opponent of his regime.
So this slide answers questions that usually crop up at the open evening. Parents often ask what class sizes are there, and it's usually around about, on average, 19 to 20 students. Occasionally, you might get a smaller class of 13 or so, and sometimes it might go up to 21, 22, but no higher than that. And then students often ask, are lessons very different? And the answer is no. We want you to get the best grades you can, and we want you to understand the work. So just like your teachers now, we'll ask you lots of questions verbally. We'll use PowerPoints, video clips, discussion group work, all to help your understanding. There probably will be a bit more homework, a bit more independent work to do. So this next slide outlines some of the things you might have to do. So more reading, and you can see how the textbooks make it a little bit easier because they're using headings and illustrations and bullet points to help you. But occasionally for some bits of work, we'll ask you to read a bit more difficult articles from History Review or from academic historians. But as was on the earlier slide, if there's any work you don't understand, the key thing is to ask. We'll happily explain it in a lesson, or sometimes you can come to Subject Plus, which is study support time on Tuesdays or Wednesdays, and come up to the history base and people will explain it further there.
Some of the things that I enjoy most about the course is how different it is from the GCSE, where the curriculum is a lot of events crammed into an extended time period, whereas in A-level history it's a lot more detailed in the teachings of those events and the historical figures that I didn't know existed before I took the course.
So when I leave college, I want to do a geography degree, and then I want to go into humanitarian aid as a career. And I think that studying history is really important for this, because you can learn about the decisions that we made in the past and how we can make important and better decisions in the future. So my favourite thing about history at Longroad is the fact that all of the topics that we study are related to government in some way. And I think this is really interesting because we can learn how government has changed over time and how government works in different countries.
Some of the things I've enjoyed most about history is definitely the chance to develop my work from GCSE through covering really interesting topics of Weimar and Nazi Germany in depth, and also the important topic of civil rights in the US for coursework, while having the freedom and opportunity to choose what you want to focus on, from activism, war, and so on. Teachers are also really good at what they do, supportive and friendly, helping you settle in from the very first lesson through group work and engaging you with the whole class, making each lesson really interesting and fun.
One thing that I have found very enjoyable is the depth that we go into when we study a historical event. This helps us have a better understanding of what happened. The teachers have such an incredible passion for teaching this course, and this helps us keep very focused. The shoots have been particularly interesting as it differs from the other time periods that we study. It also helps with anyone who's taking an English course, as a lot of the texts overlap that time period, and this really helps with contextual knowledge and helps you actually understand the text a lot better.
So these last slides just go over what subjects you might combine history with, which is a huge variety ranging from like the usual of English, geography, to things like chemistry, maths. So you can combine it with a range of subjects. It's a very well regarded A-level. It's well regarded by employers, by universities. It's because you have to be able to analyse information, communicate clearly, and then be able to sort of select relevant information to your argument and make supported judgments, justify your conclusions. We also at Longroad look to enrich your history experience, and we have a range of people coming in, which might be useful in the current climate when it's going to be more difficult to travel out. But we also in the past have done trips to A-level talks in London as well. So in terms of results, we obviously get the whole range of students studying history at Longroad. So people who've just got like grade 5s, people then who've got grade 8, grade 9, and we've got a really strong record of enabling students to achieve their target grades at A-level or better. If you look at the tables, you can see that it's roughly 65% of students at Longroad get C grades and better at A-level. Many go on and study history, others will do law, others will go into apprenticeships. We're giving you every opportunity to be successful. So thank you for visiting our virtual open evening and listening to this presentation, and we look forward to seeing you at Long Road in the future. Thank you very much for listening, and we hope to see you soon.